We're good.
Alright. This AC is for my grandparents. The one AC begins with a question. What does it mean to restrict speech to the Academy Police Station identifying as one of the fundamental parts of the greatest student? They are not the entitled tenure professor, just transient vulnerable ones. We are 1.5% of college university presidents. Something's wrong with academic culture that restricts agent speech, generally speech, agents identifying wounds in particular ways that can be fixed by the same old solutions that result in no progress. Again, a system of exclusion proven by the stories of many Asian American academic faculty who consistently report a culture of exclusion permanent status as strangers aren't appropriate for them. This is how their speech is restricted. Lee and Beckett, 2006. English is second order language instructors are sometimes strangers to the female faculty who are peripheralized by negative teaching experiences. These negative experiences have infected perceptions of their own language capacity when asked about the source of student is they time with their own perceiving confidence. English have big vocabulary speaking about them, small vocabulary speaking. I can't express something I want to say. For instance, during my lectures, I would be nervous and worried. My speech would be worse because I am nervous. The first person to develop empathy and integrity struggles to construct a pedagogical concepts of a lot to restructure new professional identities and activity structures to university classrooms. This means that any definition that doesn't include the AC within the grounds of the topic cannot ground a T in terms such an interpretation assumes the equal capability to speak English in a way that has been constructed by society that ignores other restrictions on speech. The impacts are twofold. First, this applied basically identifying as a woman in academia rates him by exclusion, inclusion, the myth of monominority persistent in plain sight. Positive stereotypes of Asian Americans, Asian Americans constantly impede progress toward equality by setting resistance movements against each other. This is Wu and 2K2. I'm fascinated by the impermanence of monominority myth. I'm often told by nice people who agree they're all doing well and different to the negative consequences of the product of the image. People sympathetic to civil rights, especially resist mentioning civil rights and Asian Americans together. They're all doing well anyways. Is the dominant innovation in the United States. The group are said to be intelligent, polite, hardworking, family oriented, law-abiding, successful. This miracle standing depiction. Meanwhile, Asian Americans entitled monominority. The public held the triumph of Asian Americans is America's greatest success story. The myth of inclusion in Asians in academia agrees to the structure of civil society and education. We learn more to get paid less, we can get power, but not too far. Any real power would be a problem. Nobody pays attention because of the service schemes like we're doing well. Woo 2. Asian Americans receive a lower return on education. They gain less money for each additional degree. They are underrepresented management. Those who are managed unless the excuse nation stereotype itself that Asian Americans rather make less money in R&D, even though Asian Americans are associated with education and remain underrepresented. Asian American women are granted academic tenure rates lower than any other demographic group. The impact is marginalization and a fractured sense of self. As long as Asians identifying as women existence based on the marks of the delegate stranger, their speech and self will always remain excluded by academia. The impact 2. This completely sense of alternating competence appear to remain unitary to feel fragmented. There were two selves who need to communicate in these women faculty. Competent Chinese speaking self and the not so competent English speaking self in the classroom. The following testimony clearly depicts the dual nature of their private and public selves in two languages. My advocacy is to use the Speech Act of the 1AC as a protest of restriction of speech that protest of restrictions of Asian speech occurring in public colleges and universities and society writ large. The underlying power structure of white supremacy means that any advocacy must include racism in its analysis, otherwise we risk recreating the harms of quote-unquote neutrality. The conscientization I engage in by doing the AC analysis is a personal method for me to name our world and understand the ways that relate in educational spaces such as debate. This is starting point for world change. Professor Keith Osajima in 2007. Conscientization for these responses may be able to name the world a meaningful education help the response recognize the impact of forces that a person have. Conscientization holds a constant clarification more maintained and provokes recognition of the world dynamics than the making such recognition often inspires people beginning their active efforts to transform the world. The chance to talk about discrimination helps response to see that their individual experiences were not unique as they seem patterns of broad forces like race which shape their individual lives. Protest supercharges conscientization to solve blending these redefinitions at the top of the conscientization of the AC is the only way to ensure solve. This is an empirical one for the amount of impacts of the AC. Osajima 2. Response commitment was deepened when they prepared for understanding and action, involved in the protest, and research gave respondents a chance to extend their knowledge to make change. And conscientization was not an accident of social affect development, so response further described multifaceted and interrelated experience that reinforce each other, inspiring further action. Programs should include social activities, breakouts, and opportunities for people to share and stories with each other, breaking from binary perspectives that often divide academia from community. Conscientization arises when people are exposed to a variety of sources. Greater coordination of influence is an important dimension of conscientization. And acts protests like the one to see are essential allowing Asian Americans to conscientize themselves by developing a properly founded grammar and to challenge the president and investigate the relationship with racial hierarchies. This means this try or die for the because Asians already have no political involvement. Kane 2016. Each of these thoughts represents an uneasy investigation of the implicit relationship between Asian Americans and the original hierarchies. I know like my conditional whiteness that educated properly mobility Asian American lives. Those conflicts because it's historically been the best interest to never discuss these things out of the vocabulary discuss it. Also, impact terms engagement arguments because the only way we can actually engage with the political is through testing these limits through the protests like the AC. Before the judge to vote for the debate that best creates space for further press within debate, traditional debate embodies the dominant power structure. The judge should hold the debaters accountable for their speech act. Smith 2013. The reality of racism debate is constituted by a single choice. They couldn't institution coaches the students debate. I watched countless rounds where competitors attempt to distance the conversation from the true reality that black debaters forced to deal with every day. Students don't have the competitors who intellectually massively make up rules to accuse black debaters of breaking the escape hard conversation. The only constructive strategy is to acknowledge the reality of the person engage in discussion and find strategies to deal with the issues at hand. Debate is not just a game, but a learning environment, liberatory potential. Even if the form debate gives to conversations not the same as you would use discuss race in general. There's not a reason you have to strip that conversation to connection to a reality that black students cannot escape. Underview. Texts like the resolution are inherently shaped by racism, so only through critical interrogation like the affirmative being possible to define the limits of topicality, shown in 1996. As we engage in rhetorical understanding of text, an important place of text against the large background of racism, interrogating whites and these discourses, and our own perspective on them reflect the contemporary global politics of neo-imperialism when people are constantly discriminating against the issues of racism in our critical policies avoid questions concerning the ways in which we see the world is remaining conditioned by unconditioned ways of seeing. This precludes any change of the only way we resolve the validity of the standards would be if we had a stable interpretation of the resolution. Only in my case opens the conditions of that time because racism gives us incorrect in terms of contesting racism in a prior question. Normative policy framework does nothing but produce disruptive network reflect forgetting and moves atrocity in the world by neutralizing terms such as racism, gender, and more the stance inherently linked to modern practice of power. Republican 2008 debate requires us to take on the position state action. The stance policy making debate comes into sense chapter negotiated with spectator passages raising authority terms like torture, terrorism, and upbringing. Simulation only serves to distance the debaters from rural participation in the political contest, give better stance policy makers in personal and imperialist perspective. Policy maker relies upon acceptable forms of evidence, gaining logical discussion, producing rational thoughts, such stances inherently linked to the normative, historical, and contemporary practice of power. This impact towards the all your inclusion benefits outweighed by the fact of putting them in debate to run them indifferent and causing them to perpetuate dominant power structures. Evaluate to you the bright line disclosure of potential level of advocacy text, please. 30 minutes around an interpretation of the topic. This interpretation laws for the most technical education because laws for creative has to be read instead of free speech versus hate speech debate over and over again. Build up best for ground engagement because the negative always have time to cut specific response to the AC. Reject competing answers. One judge mentioned is inevitable because of preconceived biases. At least bright line provides means for the judge to interpret what extent they should intervene. Two, competing answers debated to be as many books shells as possible to force their opponent to come with the counter interpretation using any time for explaining also reasonable key to checking back bad theory. Cut error.
Can you take out what you didn't read?
Yeah, sure.
You said something about cutting something right at the last
Oh, wait.
2 seconds of your speech.
Yeah, the bottom card, that's not in it. And then I didn't read this one. Because I opened up the wrong doc. But everything else should be fairly simple. Let me just make sure the advocacy text
Yeah,
response.
sure.
Yeah, I didn't realize. That's totally my bad. Oh, yeah, that's the wrong advocacy text.
Wait, what?
That's the wrong advocacy text.
Do you need a flash drive?
That would be preferable, yeah.
So should I just delete this entire app?
No, delete the advocacy text.
Can you just
Or
send
yeah,
me,
I'll
like,
just give you the
big
app. I'll just give you the app.
Okay.
It's very similar, but there are a couple spots where it's different. Yeah, I don't know why that happened. Alright, I'm just gonna save it over the previous thing.
Okay. Are like all the cards gonna be different?
No, the cards are the exact same. There's just some tags that changed.
Okay. Ready?
Yep.
Okay, let's talk about your first card. Where does Lee and Beckett say anything about speech restrictions?
Right, so specifically all that stuff.
I want you to read to me the line in the card that you specifically read that said something about speech restrictions.
Yeah, negative experiences seem to have infected perceptions of their own language capacity. During my lectures, I would be nervous and worried. My speech would be worse because I'm nervous, right? So maybe that's not
Okay,
a
so what
legal
does it have to
restriction.
do with speech restrictions? That just says a person is scared to speak because.
That's right, that's a restriction,
So,
right? In the sense that their fear is inhibiting them from speaking. It's not legal, but it's still a restriction on speech.
so do you defend only a removal of? How is that relevant to the resolution?
Because I'm saying that here's a restriction of speech.
Okay,
that's
can
not
you
a legal
define a
restriction.
restriction for me, just so we can have some clarity in this round? What is a restriction on speech?
I would
It seems
say
like something reasonable to
anything that inhibits your ability to speak, regardless of whether it's legal or social.
Okay. So right now, if there's really loud music playing, is that a speech restriction?
I think if it's so loud that you can't hear the other person speak, that would probably count as a speech restriction.
So how do you categorize speech restrictions such as loud music playing or like someone intentionally trying to silence you? How do
Right,
you
so I think that's
distinguish
clarified
those?
really well by the impacts. The Wu2K2 evidence.
No,
is
I
really
want to
well
know
on this.
how specifically in the framing of your app do you distinguish between speech restrictions such as loud music playing and speech restrictions such as
I'm saying
intentional
that,
silence?
right, the resolution asks,
No, I'm not asking what the resolution asks. I'm asking how your framing specifically distinguishes between those two types of restrictions.
how is that pertinent to the app? I say this is a bad form of speech restriction, we should solve it, right?
So you only speak to speech restrictions set.
I speak to the speech restriction
That's fine.
given at the top
Where
of the app.
you say there's a problem with restricting Asian speech. What is Asian speech?
Speech done by Asian Americans.
So is that speech that talks about Asian struggles?
No.
So like for example, if like
I say it's bad for people to tell Asian Americans you can't speak or restrict their speech in other ways. I
so
think
if an
that's
Asian
bad.
American is like ranting off racial slurs such as like the N-word, does that mean like if you say they shouldn't be doing that, that's a bad speech restriction?
Wait, what?
So
Sorry, can
for
you
example,
clarify?
you say we shouldn't restrict speech by Asians. So if an Asian person is saying something incredibly offensive, does that mean we just shouldn't restrict it solely because they are Asian?
I don't speak about the individual acts of speech for Asians to do what Asians do with their speech, right? I speak
Okay,
to
fine.
the
You
general.
said something under the under at the front of your app. You say, is the problem with like writing in interp is that it has to be written in an Asian language, or else it will disadvantage bilingual people?
No, see what Shom says is that everyone's individual experiences, right, give them a different way to interpret things, right? So to privilege any
So
one
does my
person.
interp need to be written in some sort of Asian language to be inclusive?
No, I'm just saying you can't say that the topic
Okay, that's
needs
fine. Do
only
you
one
defend
thing.
state action?
No, there's no state action.
Do you only not restrict speech for Asians?
It's defined by solvency.
I just answered the question. Here, starting prep. Do you only not restrict speech done by Asians?
Wait, do I only?
The resolution says we ought not prohibit constitutionally protected speech. Do you only ought not prohibit it for Asians, or do you ought not prohibit it for everyone?
I say that the advocacy will do that for Asian Americans.
So only for Asians, correct?
The advocacy will do that for Asian Americans, yeah.
Only for Asians. That sounds fine. Thank you.
The impacts might spill over to other areas, but yeah. The
Okay,
advocacy
fine.
will be for Asian.
Let's go to the evidence at the bottom of your case. Why does racism mean that we can't understand, like, the function of a semicolon, for example?
Right, I think that's a different argument from, that sort of missed the point of what Shom is saying. Shom is saying that we have.
You say racism infiltrates language. Why does racism affect the ability to
Right,
understand what a
because
semicolon means?
the argument that Shom makes, right, is that everybody has their individual interpretation of things, right, based on their prior experiences to it. So the way I understand a sentence is different from the way you understand a sentence. And to say that one of them is better than the other, right, is to completely ignore the way that my racial experiences might have shaped the way those things work, right? Like, I think this is a
Do
great
you have
example.
a
Like,
standard
a standard
or a
for
roll
what?
of ballot?
Yeah, I do.
Where?
The Smith 2013.
That's a roll of ballot.
Yeah, the role of judge.
Roll the judge. Okay, that's fine. Why do Asians getting paid less correspond to speech restrictions?
Right, so the argument is that it's part of the larger structure of the model minority, right, where Asians are automatically presumed to be like highly proficient at everything that they do, and that like results in them getting paid more because they're just like the absolute perfection of what it means to work hard in this country and get your things in order, when in reality, and like the academic culture, right, surrounding the fact that Asians don't actually get positions of power because they're deemed as lesser, right, contributes to that. Sweet.
Tell me when you're good.
I will.
So that's 3 off?
3 off case.
Oh boy. Okay. I'm ready.
You good, Paul?
Yeah.
Okay. A interpretation of the affidavit proposes the explicit role of the judge must specify in the form of a delimited text in the 1AC how the roundhouse will play out under that role of the judge. It cannot be implicit in the AC. To clarify the role of the judge must specify 1. How we determine what a legitimate advocacy is under the role of the judge, whether topicality constraints each debater's advocacy. 2. Whether what area of the debate must be warranted, i.e. whether a normative framework needs to be determined what counts suppression. 3. What advocacies are acceptable under the role of the judge. 4. The debate can be driven solely by the flow. For example, a cap role of the judge may speak to whether I win if I, through voting for me, is the best out-of-round benefits to cap, whereas by opponent proves the resolution is capitalistic. What is the implication of the role of the judge? Is it solely a framing issue, or is it an independent reason to vote for you? Be it a violation they don't do any of these seated standards. First engagement, 8 point, you can shoot out any response to make by recontextualizing your role of a judge, which guts fairness, such that I wasted 7 minutes of my speech time. I don't know what boosts or strategic taxes will be in the next speech. Independent reason to drop in their position, deal with trouble, I say, and for critical education, because I'm forced to spend my time debating how their position functions, but rather than understanding and engaging me more, it's linked towards your ROJ, because 1, we can't engage in an issue in depth, which doesn't allow for deliberation. 2, it's pointless to propose a new way to debate this impossible debate under disabilities, because we become 2 ships passing the night and function substantially determined why their model of debate makes it impossible to assess whether their liberation strategy is good. Even if we get the same method but different variations, it becomes impossible to weigh, which is an internal link to fairness, since it forces the judge to intervene, and since you get the final say, and each way are more persuasive the voter. Fairness to the voter, because debate is a competitive activity designed to determine the better debater, allowing for debates only determines who is arbitrarily advantaged off debater rates substance already being forced to engage in the non-topical AC posting behind a substance means T, and theory comes first to use the NC because I couldn't use fair topical, but people if we drop your apps, you still lose around because voting off of anything else functionally severance negative. Due to in our response to any cross applications to theory that you make, because they're super unpredictable, and I would have to waste my time finding them useful in interpretation sets of normativity, which means it creates out of round picks out every time have staple reasonability is arbitrary, especially with definitions to carry subjective interpretations, people reasonability, right? Intervention side, no clue what your BS meter is. This also takes out your right line because you don't actually establish why disclosing would be a good thing. You just say, you just put it out, but you don't actually provide any more inspector for education, which means there's no implication. Also, competing interpretations is better because just because you're not, it's a question of creating better norms for debate. So if my norm is better, it's probably something that we should endorse. Also, being more blank in the answer doesn't mean you meet the entire interest. The abuse is specific to each. Last like there can never be an outrageous who the burden of being fair. Always your role. The judge dominance is based on pre-round advantage. The dominance you perpetuate is based on pre-round advantages such as theory. Which only theory assesses. 1, it's the only way to prevent the continuation of oppression debate. Again, it's the judge has no way of value because subject to more unfairness in their life. Fairness lets debaters counter reason evaluation. Otherwise, rounds are overturning the rest of the world debaters. Experiencing out of round oppression expect to win in their merits. Protecting fairness is one more way to legitimize them. 2, clash violence and fairly bias against fairness, ability to participate in debaters who benefits from suffering of others. 2, gain an edge, encouraging them to maintain a status quo, not solve the issue. Thus, we can't have meaningful discourse. So, worse, they have no solvency left for you to vote on. Since it depends on your discussion, these ideas. Next off, A interpretation. Affirmative debate is an implementation of a policy option resolved. The 4 reflects a legislative forum Army school officer. Introduces a formal resolution after the word resolve at this council petition the mayor grammar key difference because it forms the basis of mutual pre-round prep and key to education by creating a hearing starting point for debate. This doesn't is under the arguments don't link to this because your ability to contextualize whether racism or good or bad doesn't actually affect your ability to understand what a colon is. It's literally grammatical. That's nonsensical. The standard is found with access to all policy based disadvantages because you're faced with an implementation. I can't go for ILD and Darwin, the specific CP solvency terms, etc. in order to act to the actual just dealing with my office. The one I recommend the implementation is irrelevant because there are certain principles like if you're in free speech or could be abstract only makes sense taking everything into context. Ground key to fairness is equal access to arguments, controls equal access to balance, and also the state is inevitable. Learning to speak the language of power only creates possibility of social change. Debating can offer this is best served by imagining the consequences. Covers don't control government about history about us. This is merely the obligation to discuss what the government should be doing after that motivation is for activism. Lost narrative is unconnected to political power. Co-opted role playing promotes active learning power. Simulation more empowering than abandoned power in the face of governmental hegemony. Imagining social revolutions no less than a fantasy than a difference in capital. One's fantasy speaks the language of power. The other disables action. This is itself and also internally turns it because the world is not an idealistic place, which means we have to look for real world strategy to get to. With proof that he's just abstracting by saying that he's doing something. It also doesn't like to read briefly because insofar as the state is inevitable, then abandoning the state would actually be disempowerment because it'd be detaching us from reality. Next off, your framing endorses hierarchy for focusing on Asian is an inherent bottom rung of socio-political power imposes arbitrarily thought and unavoidable end in your framework. It's not only ultimately is an inhibitor to our ability to make connections and redefine ourselves as subjects to the framework. You say we focus the world around agency. School Lou says no. Next, skip the card. It impacts your approach. It inhibits the unfolding subject of the other, which is found inside the else. Nihilism not only inhibits becoming, but it dissolves to linguistic and ethical incoherence. Some XQ writes, the intentionally of being is surpassed by the fold of being its full points and subjectivity. Understood the process irreducible to universal notions such as totality, unity, or any operative self-identity related to the complexity of language. There cannot be single meaning derived from a single class with signifier or signified phrase. Not all alternative perceptive delays one with our environment. Affirming applies to the self-connected stuff and their understanding is hierarchical. The alternative inspires the notion of becoming which best cheers to perceptibility because it outlines the system that demands the individual be ever-changing, breakdowning, right? Becoming worse by transferring negative and positive passions that achieving a freedom of understanding and awareness of our limits, fulfilling the essential desire to become a fulfilling subject capacity for interaction source for long-term energy and effective core of subjectivity. The role of Alice with the introduced discourse scope consists of the epiphany virtual affect by promoting education that values by the circle becoming through experimentation legitimate acts consistent with the epiphany is virtual and accepting it as acceptable. You need to warm by the subject again stable and stiff. The topicality is not constrained to the role of the valid springing issues based on the critique of your method, which is based on the flow, and your app can make theoretical objections. Cole writes cohorts living, learning the teachers go about it, observe project for a list of ideas and writing epiphanies, the virtual building relations with African understanding development that individuals must realize these strong systems. He continues to circle becoming the normalization imposed by inbuilt consistent making here or change points of subjectivity, focusing on pedagogical techniques. The use of the term return creates a space in which interactions, spiritual manifestations can reshape life forms. Now on case first, on the shown evidence, one turn incorporating issues of racism into household, it enables debaters to better understand the connections between different facets of theories and contexts to do argument interaction. Show wants us to engage these issues. This makes the interaction better. Two, no preclusion. If my shell is not dependent on a stable interpret the resolution, rather my interpret contextualizes the views in this round and how it will be applied. Each one, my interpret doesn't have to be stable. I just have to prove why it's better X, Y, Z in this round. You can just you can still have different interpretations. I just have to prove why mine is better, which is also a reason why competing interpretations is better, because it's not a question of creating one thing, but rather just saying something's better in this specific circumstance. Three, racism doesn't affect grammar. Grammar functions independently. It's not simply to say that racism affects your ability to interpret a semicolon. Also, the card is power tag. It says we have to consider racism, not that racism shapes language, which is a missing link. Also, there's no bilingual counts as contesting racism. Yes, it's bad, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about better interpretations of the res. Now, on the top of the speech, the first argument you make is that the preface of speech is professor speech is restricted to one. This is not a problem with speech restrictions, rather it's just a problem with him feeling uncomfortable because he's in a different situation, which means he doesn't have any solvency offense. Also, second is that under the rule of the ballot, he doesn't distinguish between different restrictions, e.g. loud music playing, and someone intentionally silencing someone of Asian color, which is extremely problematic because it shows there's no way to weigh between different things. It trivializes the issue. Now all your woo evidence, the problem with woo is that it's not a problem with free speech, but rather it's a problem with Asian people in academia in the first place, which means there's no link to these arguments now. Another problem is that you say under your first evidence that any T definition that doesn't include the AC doesn't solve. There's a topical version of the app, so it does include parts of the AC. You can still talk about Asian people being oppressed. You just have to do it within the context of the state. Also, you say use I assume an equal capability, no fairness. Questions whether something is equal in the first place. Then you say the impact is marginal. You say on Smith. You say that racism is bad, but one, T is always better because we get a better understanding of how to engage racism. Also, second, you say the discussions about the status quo are valuable, but the only way you can do that is we appeal to something tangible, which means it always outweighs. Then you say read Brinkley, but the problem is the state is inevitable, so if you disengage from the state, it's disempowering.
Okay. We good?
Yeah.
All right. So let's go to this T interpretation.
Which one?
The T interpretation. That's
T,
here.
okay.
Right. So you say that a colon means a policy option. So does a colon always mean a policy option?
I would say I justify why a colon is good to be a policy option.
Okay.
So
There
the
is
premise
this,
is that
I'm asking a question. Like, so can a colon mean
yeah,
anything?
this
other
is
than
exactly
policy?
what I was explaining in the round. So the problem is that not that I'm creating one rule, but I'm saying in this specific instance, the colon means a resolution. This is better because of the standards that I introduce. So in this specific instance, yes, it is better to use the colon implies resolutional act.
Okay, that's cool. So let's go into this cold peacemaker shell. Why didn't you ask me at any point to specify these things?
If you want to make arguments as to why cross-examination checks, you can. We can have that debate.
All right.
The problem is that cross-examination is meant for like strategic questioning. So if I spend the entire cross-examination.
Okay, wait. You said that's impossible for you to engage. Then why? How do you read this K?
How did I read the K?
Yeah, if it's impossible for you to engage.
Sure, I read a counter rule the ballot. But even so, the problem.
Okay, so does that not solve you of these?
No. The problem is that when I read this K, it doesn't specifically link to your app. It's not the best evidence that I could have read, and so that's a problem.
Okay, that's cool. Let's go to the K actually.
Okay.
What is the link?
Sure. The problem with the app is that you orient the subject as defined by its essential characteristic of Asianness, which traps the subject into a stable conception.
Okay, where do I define Asianness?
Sure, you say we should focus the world around Asianness, but Duluth said
Where
that's
do I
a
say
bad
that?
thing. You said that in your app.
Okay, can you point me to the line in the app where I say that?
Sure, I can control F it.
Like, is it there?
Yeah. 1 second. I don't know why. You say world a lot. Oh yeah, sure. So that's your Ojama.
Osajima?
Yeah, that. It says that it's a personal method for you. You name your own world as a question of like Asianness.
Where does it say as a question of Asianness? It says it allows me to name my world. Right?
So even that's not just the only link. The problem is that you create this hierarchy where you deem Asians to be at the bottom of,
Where do I say
and that
that?
imposes arboreal thinking. What?
Where do I say that Asians are at the bottom of the hierarchy?
Sure. You create throughout the entire first part of your speech how Asians are disadvantaged towards white people. Model minority.
Wait, so we're not allowed to talk about like
No,
oppression?
you can still talk about oppression. The problem is that you cannot do it in such an arboreal way that enforces this strict hierarchy that people can't get out of.
Okay, cool.
Oh my god, are you okay?
That's not fine, that bad.
What is the reason for no RBIs?
That's in the shell.
Okay,
I can read it out loud if you want.
I would like that.
Sure. Theory can never be an RBI since you have the burden of being fair, so, I mean, I accepted the second part, so just because you are being fair doesn't mean you just met the burden. It's not a reason why you should win.
Okay. 45 seconds of part training. The order is going to be app, Austin order.
App what?
The Austin order.
So, okay.
I'm going to be reading you stuff. Do you want this?
Yes.
Okay. And obviously there'll be stuff this next time, so just like keep your head up.
What?
I have your flash drive, right? Okay. Oh wait, yeah, okay, it's there. Lindsey. Oh, right before we start, what's the status of the alt?
Are you taking prep for that?
I'll take 5 seconds of prep if you want.
Dispo, if I go for the K, I'll go for the alt.
Okay. Should be on there.
What AR, Lindsey?
Yeah. So the order's going to be app, and then I'm going to go off the dog for responding to the theory shell.
Okay, this is just on the F.
Yeah.
Wait, what do you mean you're gonna? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm going to go to the
So
floor.
no drew offs, just everything.
Yeah.
All right, that sounds good.
We good?
Mm-hmm.
Paul?
Yeah. Yep.
The app is a call to be heard when we speak. The lead Beckett evidence says that we must redefine the restriction of speech, or else we prevent you the myth of minority and stop being agency. So her only response was that this is not a restriction of speech, but there's no definition of restriction. Her presumption that we can just understand what one is absolute BS. So this kills any liberation efforts and kill locks in impression. They say no connection, but the rule evidence explains that Asians will seem integrate but never give real power. And white supremacists still point to us as a model of success to which all minorities should strive and pass racist policies. And then be Asian Americans can't believe to traditional policy affirmation. The topic goes, we're not recognized within the realm of politics. And she says that there's a disconnect between the academy and the myth of minority, but the problem is that the Wu evidence is very clear that the fact that Asians are discriminated against and not given these positions of tenure, the fact that their speech is not seen as being worthy of getting tenure is the problem here. So when the AC solves for that, then it does solve for the problem of minorities. So then affirm my protest, the OCG men 1 and 2 have the benefits through protests of Asian realize that united aspects of their oppression and can engage in continued political judgments. Kang explains it's necessary to create the political grammar that we lack in school and debunks the myth of minority, which means she's conceded the internal link to all of her policy impact, because the problem is that she conceded in Kang that it's impossible for Asians to talk about policy within school, but if we engage in these sorts of social things, then it's eventually possible for us to engage in these sorts of political solutions. On to the cold peacemaker. First double line, either she solves her own abuse, or she doesn't meet the role, or she doesn't meet the role about doesn't meet the interpretation. She says all these things would happen if there was a role about that meant all these things. But that's a great idea. You just introduced in the one end. There's no abuse that happens whatsoever. And then even if there's some sort of abuse, turn to engagement better for you because you can read your own role about which does all these things and then contextualize my offense however you want. It's also empirically denied these sorts of debates happen, and people have lost plenty of times on this debate. Like for example, I've lost like 5 different cases this year despite the fact that my role about didn't have that sort of specification. You can also go for the K, and that would prove that there's no abuse. She goes for the K, and that proves there's no abuse on the roll about story. And then also, she says that this link turns into a roll about, and I can't engage any issue in depth with the problem is that disclosure solves. I already told you what all the potential of offense was. You did not ask me to do any of these things, so it's impossible. But so additionally, CX solves. Like you could have asked me in CX to specify all these things, and they're either yes, no question, or you get a better abuse story. There's no debate here. So if you want a counter interpretation, debaters may read a roll about that does not specify the things in her interpretation. The benefit of this critical discussion because I get to introduce more in the AC as long as I'm not spending wasting time on these pointless specifications. So T. There's no topical version of the app. She's conceded the candidate, which tells you that Asians are unable to participate in politics at the moment. They're not seen as having a political grammar or seen as worthy of being put into positions of power. So it's impossible for me to engage with the topic through policy affirmation. That was her only definition. So there's no other way that the app could have been topical. Next thing, role of the judge to vote for the debate that best creates space for the press within debate. The Smith evidence says we need to fix our norms. The traditional debate results in racism because only white engagement with the topic is accepted. This impact towards all fairness of participation and limits our since the only fairness and limits our norms are created by whites. Exclude minorities and kill minority participation. They're going to say they have the internal ground, but you need to weigh impacts of your probability. They want to go for total fantasy where everyone follows the rules. Only is that in that fantasies they're often true where everyone reads literally the topical app exactly the way they define, which trades off with a 100% certain exclusion from T if you were to vote against the app. Prefer additionally since they impact scenarios are empirically denied. The trend in LD has been away from topical actions despite more people reading T. Their T is also the embodiment of whiteness. Their model debate is one which you can only be a policymaker since the non-political act the nature of the app was the violation. But then the only policies are T. Repeatedly explains that the policy simulation means people ambivalent towards suffering as the linchpin of global violence and debates solution, emotional connection, things like global genocide and racism and talk about them as no real consequences. That turns out ways their limits and ground arguments because these only matters if people get something out of the model debate, but they concede with that people either become emotionless and ignore and perpetuate genocide or have to quit because they no other method of engaging. And specifically, their responses to these were we're way too brief. To the Smith evidence states T is always better. We get a better understanding how to engage racism, but there's no word for this and why we can't have a social solution that also does this. And then you also say incorporating racism, and then you also say again, disengaging with the state is disempowering because the state is inevitable. But the problem is that you've conceded that. We can engage with the state in the future, and then also perm do the after the alternative net methods of agent person. They crossplay Liam Beckett knows most of the apological conscientization and formulation of agent. The KF says Asian Americans have no political grammar to engage in political discussion, so we can't pursue it in the all-day content until we conscientize it. And then also there's just no link. Like the warrants she said or the app are just not there. Like she couldn't point to a single point. Be very skeptical on two ends.
Wait, hold on, I wrote it down yet. I have two. I'm gonna ask you. What was the perm?
Do the app and the alt.
Justification.
Cross applications of the Liam Beckett and the OCG evidence, right? So they say specifically that Asians are unable to participate in politics at the moment or like political alternatives, right? So it's impossible for Asians to engage with the alternative until the app's been done first.
So the argument is that they can't engage the alternative because they can't engage politics, correct?
Well, yeah, specifically
Okay.
they're not given a voice, right, in the status quo.
So is the argument that the alt is inaccessible absent your app, correct?
Yeah.
Alright.
I can take out what I didn't read if you want.
Yeah, I would like that.
Okay. This was all red. And then this was all extant, but if the cross application were to lean back in at the SGM.
Wait, this sucks because I wanted to ask you a question, but I wanted Paul to be here to hear.
You can wait, it's fine.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. Sounds good. So how's life?
I don't know. This is kind of my last real engagement that I have before the end of the year, which is kind of nice. So, I mean, even if I go to 6, at least I'm just done with things.
Oh, congrats on Harvard, by the way.
Thank you.
Paul, I paused my prep because I'm asking you a question and I want you to hear it.
Yeah, I was cool with it.
Very cool.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
You're okay.
Just ask.
Yeah,
Okay.
you said it.
What's the implication to all of your arguments about why fairness is bad?
There aren't arguments for why fairness is bad. It's why what you did is bad.
Yeah, what's the implication?
Right. So,
It's like a really quick answer. Just like, what's the implication?
Reed Brinkley says you lose because your representations, right, or your model debate that you're trying to create makes people ambivalent towards suffering, right?
You
and
extended Reed Brinkley? I didn't hear you extend Reed Brinkley.
I read this verbatim. I extended Smith for many of the reasons that you lose.
You extended Smith? I didn't see that.
I mean, like, I'm telling you, I read these extensions word for word.
From the app?
Yeah, you see all the stuff under T, like that was read. I read that word for word.
There's no extend. Okay, whatever. Okay. The order is going to be the K. Overview the K. Sound good?
Yep.
The lesson learned is that you can't respond to the K with 20 seconds left on the timer. I'm winning strength of link weighing on all of this, so I'll concede that theory that is not valuable and that we shouldn't evaluate theory, but the implications are super unclear. So let's go on to the shell proper. You say that fairness is a bad thing, which is a reason why you reject the shell, not reject the debater, which is a missing link. So even if fairness is bad, so I agree that fairness is bad. I just changed my mind. I just realized you brought me a realization that fairness is bad. So that means that I'm changing my norms. I'm working to become better. If fairness is bad towards Asian people, I don't want that to happen, which means we shouldn't use fairness. So there's no implication to this. Oh my God. There's no implication to this argument as to why you should drop me as a debater. It's just a reason why I was wrong once and I realized that I'm wrong. So now we're going to use the K. Now, on the K, the only argument that you make is this perm, but great, the perm is a new link. So the problem is that you say the framework is inaccessible to Asian people, which defines Asian people based on the essential quality of their Asianness. You literally say that Asian people cannot access the framework, which means that you define your advocacy based on what Asian people can and can't do, which is essentializing and confines the Asian people to certain restriction, which is a new link. That's not a reason why it's a net benefit for the perm. It's rather just a reason why you're categorizing people in these stable ways, such as no Asian person can engage in your framework. So let's go down the case. First at the top of the K. One sec. Top of the K, the problem is that your framing endorses a strict hierarchy. You talk about the model minority, which is always comparing the minority in reference to the majority. The link is that you specifically only compare the subject to the Asian subject to the white majoritarian subject, which creates this sort of static categorizing that dilutes and indicts. Additionally, you impose some form of arboreal thought because you say that Asians are at the bottom, e.g. they are persecuted, which may necessarily be true, but the question isn't whether your framework is true, but whether your starting point is specifically a bad thing. Now, onto the impacts. The problem is your approach inhibits the unfolding of the subject, which is found inside the self. The thing is that subjectivity is not reducible to universal identities because that would inhibit the process of becoming and breaking through from these identities, which independently turns your case because it's not a question of imposing an identity on someone that they might not agree with, but rather being able to break through it. Also be pointed out ways on the long term because you'll be stuck with the same identity on yourself for the entirety of your life and you won't be able to break through it in the sense that becoming allows. Now, this is always going to outweigh any of your case offense and reasons why fairness are bad because becoming specifically conceptualizes that you have the ability to turn the negative into the positive, which means that we can always just reinterpret norms. That's also a reason why it takes out theory because theory is a static norm and everything is fluid in the sense that we can reinterpret it, which independently means theory is not an issue. Now, the other problem is unfolding of the subject is necessary. You assume a priori fixed self-identity that the Asian self is always going to be persecuted. You assume this essential feature of the Asian subject, which is a problem. Also, the subject cannot be essentially defined since it's complex and diverse and much more than the quality of Asianness. The problem, now go to the alternative. The alternative is imperceptibility or oneness with the environment. So the problem is you can't separate the self from their identity, from the environment, which is what you do by focusing simply on Asianness. And we need to embrace the notion of becoming the Bride-Dottie evidence is great. It says by coming works by transforming negative into positive and acknowledging that things are subject to change, such as the fact that Asian people may be oppressed in the status quo. So the framing issue on the K isn't that your framework is wrong, but rather it's the wrong starting point. I agree that Asians may be oppressed, but the problem is the way you start off this conceptualization is a bad thing. So it does not matter if your framework is true. All that matters is that it's the wrong starting point. Now extend the role of the ballot, which is to vote for the debater whose discourse is is most consistent with the epiphanies. You need to warrant why the subject being as stable is a good thing, since that is what the aff implies, which means absent this warrant, you don't have any reason to link into the roll of the ballot, since the roll of the ballot is based on the ability to flow. Also, it's a framing issue, which you do not link into. The problem is that you do a really shitty extension of your roll of the judge, and the problem is that my roll of the ballot, you're conceding my roll of the ballot, which is always going to outweigh the only argument you make as to why the roll of the ballot's a bad thing is because it's inaccessible. But the problem with this is it's another link. So insofar as you are conceding the roll of the ballot, which you clearly do not link into, then you do not get access to this. Then the problem is your perm is another link. You say people can't participate in politics, but the problem is that you define Asianness as something that doesn't allow them to participate in politics. So, let's go onto this overview you make, I guess. So on the roll of the ballot, on the roll of the judge spec, I'll deal with these clearly. You say there's no abuse because disclosure solves and CX solves. Okay, so disclosure solves, CX solves, it's not an issue now. On implementation C, you say there's no T version in the app. Okay, there's no T version in the app. That's better. Now you say the problem is if in the next speech, the framing issue is if he tries to extend any sort of argument as to why I am being a manifestation of whiteness or imposing or being white, which is a reason to drop me. The problem is that appeals to these sort of static conceptions of the subject that Deleuze identified. So these aren't framing issues for you. They're not proactive reasons to vote for you under my roll of the ballot, because my roll of the ballot specifically contextualizes that we shouldn't impose these identities on people, and we should view people by more than their identity. So he's conceding the entirety of the K. The alternative is pretty clear, and his perm is a new link because inaccessibility is defined by an essential attribute of the subject. He can't win any reason as to why fairness is whiteness, because that would just fight into the K by imposing categorization.
Okay, I think I have how much?
Oh wait, I wrote it down.
Alright.
You have 45 seconds.
Alright, run it.
Oh, it's been way more than 40.
Oh, sorry. So the order's going to be an overview on all this stuff about on the T flow and the ROB spec flow, right? Then on to K.
Okay.
All right. Is everybody ready?
Mm-hmm.
There was a very large mistake made in the last speech, Lindsey. You conceded that I get an RBI, even if the argument was not made very long, for a very long time, and that I win on it, right? You also have conceded in the text of your of your shell that it outweighs roll the judge arguments. At worst, use epistemic modesty between the voting stories of her going for the K and me going for the RBI on the ROB spec shell to determine who's winning the round. At the point where there's literally not a single word said about it in the 2N, if I have any ink whatsoever on the K flow, then you should just default to voting for me, because at the worst it's unclear between the two. There's been no weighing done until now. So at that point, go to the T flow. She's also losing because she says that I conceded her role of the judge, but the problem is that first of all, she conceded the RBI outweighs the role of the judge, so the role of the judge concession doesn't matter. But she's also not doing a very good job with Smith. At the point where you have two competing role of the judges, where it's very hard for you to distinguish how each of them filters impact him, which one's coming first. So you should still look towards the extension of the impacts coming out of the role of the judge extension. So the Smith evidence says we need to fix our norms that traditional debate results in racism because only white engagement with the topic is accepted. I'm not saying that there's a static notion known as whiteness. I'm saying that like the kind of engagement is the kind that's seen as white, so that this specifically in back turns all of your arguments and results in people not being able to engage in the sort of becoming that you're talking about because they're just kicked out of the activity. That has nothing to do with fairness being a bad concept. I'm saying this is what happens in a world where we just treat these things as completely neutral, where we treat these things as just sort of being this way. So you've conceded that this results in 100% certain exclusion from T if you're going to vote against the app, and 100% exclusion coming from the fact that she read this. The fact that she's only going for terminal defense on this is very telling. It was not about the content of it. It was about what she was trying to do with the individual interpretation. So at that point, she conceded that the T interpretation is the embodiment of everything that forces debaters to try and conglomerate into one specific static notion of what it means to be a debater, and that the Reed-Brinkley evidence is very clear on specifically saying it makes people ambivalent towards suffering as a linchpin of global violence, which is still important under her world about, because if people do not give a crap about people becoming anything, or people do not care about people being able to access debate whatsoever, then they're never going to be able to get any of those benefits. So it's a prerequisite question. The offense on T still very clearly links to your role of ballot. You can't just say terminal defense on the abuse story, because the abuse it was not just terminal defense on the abuse story that I read in the last speech. It was reasons for why the interpretation themselves are a bad thing. So let's go on to critique. Even here, you should not be even looking at any of this evidence, Paul, because they're very clear place that you can vote before you even have to look to the role of ballot flow. But she's also conceded that her only response to the permade, which was short, but it's still going to be very powerful in this instance. She says that defining agents in response to their ability not to be able to engage in something is a new link at the critique, but at the point where she's literally conceded the Kang is true, right? She says she's making an argument that it would be very useful if people were only defined in respect to their ability to do this, and then they were able to engage in the app, right? That outweighs, that's a prerequisite to any ability to actually engage with the alternative. The alt is impossible, like regardless of how the alt would be done. It doesn't matter if the alt's impossible, an agent can't do it. She's conceded the truth of Kang, which says that agents can't engage with the alt, so the app needs to come first.
Good round.
Good round.